Have you ever wondered why so many people are put at risk while inspecting our country's roads? Probably not, but Josh Hobbs has, and just as well, because every time a road is checked in New Zealand, people are put at risk of injury or even death. Losing a friend in a workplace accident was a driving force behind his developing a solution to this dilemma, and by doing so, he managed to create a whole new job for himself. But this is just one of many unique projects Josh has on the go, as well as raising 4 kids. With ideas sprouting like mushrooms, it was his learning through the Master of Tech Futures program that helped pluck the ideas out of his head and turn them into a viable reality. Josh, hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Thank you for your time this morning down in balmy Christchurch. It's nice to talk to you, Josh. A little bit about your background. I often wonder if engineers start out being really good at playing with Lego. How did your interest get sparked?
I suppose it started quite young. I was always really interested in technology and looking at new things and what was coming onto the market. I'd always been sort of involved in new technologies. Actually started out as a chef in the Navy, and then from that was always looking at technology and sort of wanted to advance my career in a way that linked towards using new innovative technologies to help business.
So being in the Navy, obviously you were busy in the kitchen, but was that the place that it started, that you saw what other people were doing and thought, oh, I'd quite like to do a bit of that?
Yes and no. I think it was more of a sideline where I was on traveling a wee bit and seeing a lot of new tech in places like Singapore and Dubai and things like that, and then looking back at old little New Zealand, which still had fish and chips and things like that, which were the mainstays of most people's lives. So it was sort of inspired to see new technology in other countries.
And then did you go back and study after that?
No, I didn't. I actually moved into working in IT in sales, and then I didn't start studying until quite later.
Okay, and what did you study when you did do it?
That was with the Masters, so that was my first formal qualification.
Okay, so you haven't been to engineering school or?
No.
No, so you come in with quite fresh eyes, really, probably with quite a different perspective than other engineers would come in.
Yeah, I think it was very much more of a human-focused approach rather than a technical-focused approach. So I really wanted to be able to try and deliver a project that was going to make a difference to people and reduce the risk of injury or death in New Zealand. So that was probably one of the main drivers for me.
So tell me a little bit about the project so we can understand what you've been doing.
Yeah, sure. So my project was to look at the current process for road survey and how we could change that to be more automated and be safer and reduce risk. So if you think of the current process is you have 2 guys that are in a truck. Every time they find a pothole, they'll stop, put on coats, flashing lights, and then hop out on the road, take pictures and measure, and then hop back in their car and go to the next one. It's quite labour intensive and it's very high risk. From a risk profile perspective, they're sitting at about a 22% risk of a near miss or accident in the old process, which is, that's essentially 1 day a week where they could be hit by a car or a bus. As can be evidenced by the accident that happened last year up in the North Island, where those guys were inspecting a culvert. A truck came along and hit their car, which then rolled onto them. So it is a very high risk role. So we looked at lots of different technologies that we could do this with. We started with LiDAR, as that was sort of the market preference at the time, and looked at synthetic aperture radar and oblique imagery. But we LiDAR was great, but the problem was that it actually added more complexity. So you had to have specific equipment that was really, really expensive. So you're talking $1 million plus for a LiDAR. Then you had to have specific people to be able to run the equipment, and then a lot of post-processing to get it to the point where you could actually use the data that you'd got out of it. So we stripped everything back and basically just settled on GoPros as a way to capture the imagery, and then looked to create a model, a computer vision model, which could look at those images and pick up defects, measure them, and provide outputs. Throughout the proof of concept phase, now that we've got it to that nth degree, we're sort of looking at about a risk profile of about 5%. So we've taken it from 1 day a week to 1 day a month where these guys are having a near miss or accident. So it's reduced it quite significantly. The process of doing the road inspection has gone from 66 days to 5 or 7 days. So it's huge in time saving. So there's quite a few benefits.
For people like me who aren't out inspecting roads, the way that you're doing it is really different. And when you look at it, for even someone like me looks at it and goes, oh, well, that's such a great idea, because it seems to be, obviously, hopefully saving lives and things, but technologically, it's also pretty brilliant. So just explain to us, if you were looking at the video that we're looking at, how it works.
Yeah, cool. So essentially, if you look at this, it's a GoPro that's mounted on the front of the car. The vehicle's travelling at 90 to 100k an hour. Once that footage has been completed and being taken, it then gets uploaded through a portal. We take that imagery, break it into frames, and then run it through a machine learning model which has been trained to look for specific defects and measure and give severity. Once that's been done, it then creates a file or a CSV which can be exported into a job management system, and then allows them to automate the process of creating work orders to start repairing or prioritising the defects to ensure that the defects that are the largest are getting repaired first to sort of increase safety across the network.
I mean, we quite often see people around doing this kind of thing and don't realise the risk that they are putting themselves in. By taking the risk away and taking the people away and using technology instead, are you effectively losing jobs for people?
No, I think it's probably the opposite. Some people will have some retraining, but then others will actually have time to focus on more important activities like making sure that roads are safer and carrying out activities like that. So if you think of the fact that, the standard practice takes 66 days and we're reducing that to 7, there's 50 days plus that guys can be out making sure that roads are safer and focusing on other pieces of work, which are probably more important.
Why hasn't this been addressed before? It seems like something that, is a no-brainer. We want to look after people. And what was it that made you want to do this? Was there something that sparked inside you that kicked it all off?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a couple of things to that. One, the technology availability is probably been one hindrance. You need pretty specialised equipment to be able to run the machine learning models, and they've only sort of been released for general use probably in the last 1 to 2 years. The advancement of camera technology is the other one. So having a camera that has got a good enough quality of image and is robust enough to be able to handle the rigours of being on the front of a car, that's probably quite key to it. So there's a few factors, and there has been a bit of work done around the world about it, but it's been a problem that's been challenging for quite a while.
And was there something personal in it for you?
I had a friend who was killed in a workplace accident probably 3 years ago, and me and my children have quite a bit of banter and share memes, and he never gets to do that with his kids anymore. So that was a real driving factor, was to try and do something that was going to help reduce the risk of children not having parents or friends not having friends.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? We see these people on the side of the road and they're doing their job and you kind of just drive by and don't think about it, but they're really putting themselves at risk. Yeah. So coming into the Masters, were you surprised at what you ended up with, or did you go through and you had quite a specific idea of what you were going to do and that came out the other end and that was exactly it?
I was surprised at where it ended up. It's turned into basically a full-time job for me now, which is great. It's opened the doors to a whole lot of other really interesting projects, which I'm starting to work on now. The guys at work like to joke that I essentially went to Masters so I could make my own job, which is sort of what I've done, which is awesome. But I think I learned a lot during the Masters, not only just about machine learning and new technologies, but also about myself and pushing myself to actually get to achieve goals and get to where I really wanted to get to.
What were some of those things that you learned that you were surprised about yourself that you weren't expecting to come across?
I've always been quite nervous about interviewing people. So we had a couple of really, really good speakers who gave us really good techniques for interviewing and actually gaining knowledge. you went out to talk to people who at first instance would look at this and think they were going to lose their jobs. So it made for quite challenging interviews. And when I spoke to Melissa about this, when I was on the master's course, she was, I was like, these people are probably going to be quite aggressive towards me. And, her response was like, well, you just have to harness that, because those people are the ones that are probably going to be the most honest. So they're going to be most critical and most honest, and they're going to provide you probably the best feedback. Utilising that to be able to go to these interviews and just have that in the back of your mind, that even though these guys were basically ripping apart everything that you were doing, you were getting really good, honest, critical feedback, which was going to help in the long run.
And I suppose that's indicative of technology helping us move forward, but at the same time it needs to be human-centric, where we can appreciate that there's humans that are being affected as well. How did the course address that for you?
Yeah, it did. It helped a lot. And I think the course was very much around using technology not only to help business, but also for good. I've tried to keep that ethos moving forward, and looking at some of the new projects I'm working on. That's very much the centre of that.
What are some of the other projects you're working on, and how is technology, at the forefront of them?
Yeah, cool. So some of the projects that we've got lined up and are looking to do next year is one is using natural language processing, which is another machine learning type model, which is basically enables you to look at comments and gauge sentiment. Where we're looking at using this is for community outreach programs. So if a charitable organisation starts a new community outreach program which has capability of delivering services to a community that's in need, whether it be medical services or schooling, we look at Facebook, Twitter, all of those feeds, and then gain sentiment from how that facility has helped those people. We then also look at anonymised health data and see if there's been an increase in the amount of vaccinations or the decrease in flu, cold or measles within those regions. And then we can give that data to those charitable organisations so that when they're going for more funding, they can actually say, well, here is anecdotal evidence that our work is helping the wellbeing in the community, helping them to try and secure funding with actual data. Another example that we're looking at next year, and probably the next few years after that, is working with a foundation out of Australia and monitoring whales. So using passive sonar buoys to listen for whales and then identify each individual whale, and then using satellite and saturated imagery to track the whales as they're moving up the coast of Australia and watch their migration and navigation paths. And then overlay that data with what the impacts of oil research vessels that are doing sonic blasting are having on the navigation and migration patterns of these whales, to show whether they do actually affect them.
So that's quite a few really different types of projects that you're doing.
Yep.
And it's all technology based.
Yep.
So how important in education, maybe in traditional forms of education, do you think they're addressing technology enough for solutions?
No, I don't. And I think the problem that you have is that you've got, I suppose if you look at the schooling system, it's a large organisation which takes a long time to move, and technology is moving at a rate which is so fast. So you've got to have the capability to bridge that gap between technology changes and educational requirements at schools, I suppose. And how you do that, I'm not entirely sure. But technologically, the world is advancing so fast. Even if you look at camera technology as an example, they're saying within probably 2 years' time, we're going to have photonic-based cameras, which means we'll be moving from megapixel images to gigapixel images. So that means, if you think a megapixel is 1,000, a gigapixel is going to be 1,000 pixels. So your image quality is going to be 1,000 times better.
So I imagine on the masters there was people who were coming in with no idea, and that was the reason they were coming in, because they wanted to understand technology. But you sound like you were probably quite savvy to begin with. Did you learn things through the masters? Was there moments where you thought, gosh, I never would have thought this was possible?
Yeah, there was, and I suppose it probably wasn't so much on the technology front, but it was more on the human element and the learning different skills around agile and actually managing projects was where I learned the most.
So it sounds like there was quite a broad spectrum of different areas that you could learn in and take something away from.
Yeah, there was a huge broad spectrum, and also getting inspiration from other people. So the morning sessions we used to have where people would come and talk to us about technology that they were using or developing was also quite fantastic and really inspirational.
Well, it sounds like you might be one of those people now with all your projects on the go.
Yeah.
A lot of your projects were very sort of social well-being type projects, and we're wondering what drives you in that direction. Is it the technology, or is it that you want to do good in those places? What is it about those projects that sort of stood out for you?
Yeah, I suppose for me personally, it's a mixture of both. I think socially, it's really important that we use our skills to help people that probably don't have the ability to access the information and technology that we do. And, you've got this decreasing cost of technology, which is happening all of the time. So you can get technology that 5 years ago was ridiculously expensive, which can now be used to help people at very, very low cost. So we sort of spend a lot on charitable programs within New Zealand, and we could use some of those funds in probably a fundamentally completely different way and still provide really, really good outcomes for people. So for me personally, I see it as something that I feel that I need to do.
Good on you. Well, good luck with all of them, and thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
It sounds amazing. We look forward to seeing them all play out.
Yeah, watch this space.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh.
Josh is one of those people who would make for an interesting deep dive into how their mind actually works. The many and varied projects he holds in his head is impressive while negotiating the logistics of a house full of kids. He's proof you don't need academia behind you to do this Master of Technological Futures program, and an example of the practically minded turning an idea or even an inkling into a reality. And in Josh's case, creating positive outcomes at a wider community level. Who knows, you too might be able to carve out a whole new career path for yourself as Josh did. If you're interested in learning a little more about machine learning and artificial intelligence and how those technologies can actually enable us to realise the innovative and creative ideas we have, see the episode webpage for more. You can read more or watch a video of Josh's RE technology in action. And if you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more stories from New Zealanders making impact in their own way, subscribe to the podcast in your podcast player for more.